In this scene, Eric's movements are being driven by another rig. A simple skateboard rig that he's currently standing on top is the one being animated. This could be a skateboard, a surfboard, which actually gives me a lot of neat ideas for flip sims, maybe in the next video. Anyways, we're going to use another rig to control our character rig and make more advanced custom controls for animation. We begin with the starting pose that has Eric looking like he's ready to skateboard. This initial pose will kickstart the entire setup. Don't ignore it, it's very important. For this video, I'm going to jump straight into creating the advanced custom controls just because we've gone over character posing throughout the previous videos. It's time to move on. We will set up a full body IK layer for Eric and set up the skateboard rig. This will be similar to what we've done many times before, except all the IK controls and bone controls will now be merged into the custom controls. The custom controls will act as a bridge between the two rigs, connecting them together to allow us to create more advanced controls for animation. At the end of the custom controls, we feed all this data back into Eric and back into the skateboard rig to be processed by the bone deform and allow Houdini to do the remaining calculations. There are a lot of things I have here in the scene that creates the final animation. Most of these other sections were covered in my other videos. The secondary motion adds a bit of final touch to the animation and creates a more realistic hand movement to sell the skateboard look and is covered in Kine-FX basic concept number 5C. The camera tracking is just what it says. It sets up the scene to calculate the offset position of our skateboarding Eric that is rolling around the scene and tells the camera where to go, so we can keep Eric constantly in the shot. This was covered in my previous camera tracking video. The blender section here simply cleans up the materials and creates specific groups for each object, and in this case I only have two, a group for the skateboard and a group for Eric. This part is still in the work. The main focus of this video, basic concept number 7, is the custom controls. That's where we'll spend most of our time. Basic concept number 7, advanced custom controls. Now we're going to redo all this. So let's start off by deleting everything. We're going to start from scratch. We're left off here with the initial pose. Let's move this back up since we have all this awkward space. We're going to start off with the initial pose. Now what's the first thing I want to do? Anchor points. Let's choose some anchor points. We're going to start by getting Eric's IK controls set up properly. And to do that, we have to actually go through it like the previous videos. Set up the anchor points, set up the full body IK. Now I'm going to go over this quite quickly because we have done this several times throughout the previous videos. Match by attribute, name, send this over. Now, what are my IK controls? What are going to be my IK controls? Delete non-selected, points. The points are really small. Okay, that's much better. I'm going to turn on the name as well. The head, the pelvis, head, pelvis, hips. I want those to be anchored down. Okay, I think... And then we're going to need the root. So let's enter that in. Now, how do I actually know the anchor points? You know that you want to anchor down the hips. You don't want the hips to fly everywhere. So that's the first thing you want to anchor down. How did I know I needed to anchor down the head and the root? The head was part of the spine, and I didn't want Eric's head to start rotating everywhere, so the head was anchored down. As for the root bone, I wanted the root bone to accurately tell me where Eric's position was. The root bone doesn't affect Eric's limbs in any way, it was just for better organization. You know that the feet have to move, so don't anchor that down. Now I'm gonna do... I want my feet. I want a right foot. I'm going to label this right foot. I'm going to put another one with the left foot because this is going to be bridged onto the skateboard. So I want to separate it. Rig pose this. Then I'm going to take the anchor points over here and merge all that. And all this goes into the full body IK. Now we can start testing this out. Let's select the full, the rig pose. Come over here. Let's see what we can do with legs. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Now I want to be able to manipulate all of them. What we can do is a nice little trick. This is not going to work in all cases, but if you come over here in the rig pose node and select this little arrow and select multiple, okay, it'll look like this just because I don't have the render flag on the rig pose. So come over here, put the render flag here, and then press this button again. This will pop up, but I'm not going to use this hierarchy window. I'm going to use the viewport instead. So let's click this, and then I'm going to select all of these guys. Press enter. So multiple bones will be selected to be manipulated in the rig pose node. You'll see right here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to try this out. Let's put the render flag back onto the joint to form, come back to the rig pose, and let's try and manipulate. This just gives us one control to manipulate everything. I know it's a little wacky, but it does work because both his legs are moving. His hip, pelvis, and head are not moving. They're fixed. So the anchor points are working. This is important. I know this is not exactly it. I mean, this could be something you want. Tiptoeing. Hot. Sorry. That could be a possibility. Now, the reason why the feet are not following this widget, because I'm pulling it down. But the left foot is going up. These axes are different. The local axes on the left foot are different from the right foot. So when I'm pulling this down, I'm pulling the Z axes down this way. So the left foot over here has the Z axis pointing that way. And that results in something weird when you manipulate this. Pull this down. So they're both going in opposite directions because the local axes are different, but I'm manipulating one axis. And when you're trying to manipulate multiple bones at the same time, it's a quick and easy test to see if we have everything set up correct. So this is not going to be used so it's just for testing. The next thing we want to do is parent this to our skateboard rig. So let's grab that skateboard rig. Come over here to the side. Okay, I'm going to go to FBX. Character import, just how we import any other character. The skateboard is sort of like a character. It's a rig by itself. Rig, and then drop down joint forms. This should be super familiar. And since the skateboard only has a single bone that does anything like a single practical bone, I only need a rig pose. Let's just test, quick test. Looks good. Okay, so this is only for testing. Now, how do we connect this guy to this guy? Well, first of all, organization pays off. Okay, now how to bridge these two guys together? Well, here's the bones, or the IK bones of Eric. I'm going to ignore this, and I'm going to ignore this, so we're not modifying things by accident. And here's the bones of the skateboard rig. Now, let's first merge them together, because we need both rigs to meet in the middle. So let's take this and merge it together so we can get everything in and build our custom controls. Okay, so we have everything here. Now I'm going to create a different color for this so I can identify this a bit easier. The skateboard rig will be white, so I'm going to choose white. The dots are still kind of small, so it will be a little bit more clear once we parent it together. Let me take that up. This has all the bones together. So let me actually put null and let's label this. Now we have bones everywhere. This is useless to us unless we parent it and rebuild our hierarchy for our custom controls. Sorry, I just realized this. Now what do I want? I want the skateboard to drive the Eric rig. The skateboard will be the parent because the parent always drives the children. Wherever the parent goes, the children follow. Now there's a node in Houdini called parent joints, and this allows us to rebuild the structure or rebuild a whole new rig from points merged together, or bones in this case. So what do I want to do? I want to take all Eric's feet and I want to parent it to the board root bone because the feet are fixed onto the skateboard. So let's add this. Now let's choose Eric's feet. Now this pops up once you click that. And let's choose Eric's feet. So these two and the right foot, these two. Press enter. That's selected in. And what is that going to be parented to? because we have to choose a parent here. And that's going to be parented to the skateboard root bone. We can actually choose it down here. I know it's this bone, but let's choose it from the viewport because that's probably where you're going to be doing it later on in your project. This is the one here. It's important that I choose the board root bone because the board bone, as I mentioned before, that's a spare bone. So let me just choose this, press enter, and that gets added up here. Now, what else do I want to parent? Well, the rest of Eric's bone, like the spine, the pelvis, the hip, the head, and the root, well, that's going to be parented to the other bone. We may not always have enough bones to spare in our second rig to drive our character rig, but not to worry. We can always create as many spare bones as we need. These spare bones will act as additional custom controls. So we're going to create that spare bone. In Kine-FX, every point SOP inside the SOP context is a bone. So this is extremely handy. In order to create another bone, let's just drop down and add SOP, and let's just add a point. And there we have our bone. In Kine-FX, every bone needs to have a name. So we have an add here. Let's give it a name. I'm gonna change this to points. That's what we need. The group, well, that's just, there's only 1 point on here. So you can just leave it empty, or you can just put 0. There's 1 point. And I'm gonna name it spare bone. There's our spare bone right there. Now let's take this and merge it to the rest of our custom controls. Let's take a look at what we have here. So our spare bone is sitting right there. Now that's what we can do right here. Let's go back to the parent joint. Now let's choose the Eric bones that we want to parent to our spare bone. Let's choose the rest of this. I want the pelvis, the hip, and the root of Eric. And I want the head. Don't forget there's a head that's lying up here. So we have all these guys selected, and press enter while your mouse is over the 3D viewport. So that's added over here. So we have, okay, I'm gonna make this a little bigger so you can actually see what's in there. Okay, there you go. So here we're selecting the pelvis, the hip, basically all the spine bones and the root of Eric. We're gonna parent that to the spare bone that we just created. So we can just select it down here in this list, or you can select it using the viewport, clicking this, and it's right here if you look down here in the viewport. I'm gonna select it through the drop down. Okay, spare bone. Now, what's that going to do? In order to answer that question, we have to complete the rest of our custom rig. Okay, we have this weird parenting and all this stuff done in here. And this is quite useless without the joint to form. And Eric heavily relies on the full body IK node. So we do have to send all this information back to Eric and back to the skateboard rig in order to complete each rig. The custom controls is just a middle step, the middle bridge that bridges both rigs together. But after it finishes all its calculations and all its fancy work, we have to send the data back to each joint to form to complete the process. Now let's come over here and connect it back to the full body AK. But wait, this has everything, including the skateboard bones. Well, what we can do here and just blast it out. Blast what we don't want. And we don't want anything that has to do with the skateboard. So let's come over to the blast node, points. And we actually know what we want to delete, which is, select it. Actually can't find it. It should be in here. Because it's overlapping each other right there, I'm just gonna type it in. So at name. Because the spare bone, that's where we attach the name. It's in the name attribute. So let's come over here to the spreadsheet and I'll show you. Okay, so we know the name is down here. Let's take a look. Where is our spare bone? Oh, I already deleted it. Sorry. Okay, let's select this one. There's the spare bone right there. So we know that it has a name attribute in the points called spare bone. You can delete it by the attribute name, and you can do that using the @ symbol. And that just is a shortcut to get the attribute name. So spare bone, and the other one was called name equals board root. So okay, if you look in the viewport, nice. We only have, there's a board, that other spare bone. Let's also delete that. Name equals board. For demonstration purposes, I've labeled this spare bone, but in reality, I would have labeled this a bit better. If everything was prefixed with the board name, all I had to do would be board asterisk, because everything begins with board. I just want to delete everything that has anything to do with the board. Enter. Now we're left off with only bones related to Eric's rig. Perfect. Now we're going to connect this to Eric's full body. Okay, let's see what happens. Put the render flag over here. It's working. We still have our initial pose. Now we haven't modified anything yet. Let's add a rig pose node because we want to make a move. That's the end. That's the goal at the end of the day. Now where do we add it? We go back to the custom controls here because it's trying to create a custom control. Let's drop down a rig pose node down here. Now which bone are we going to move? Now remember, we're trying to drive the Eric rig using the skateboard. So we want to move the skateboard. Everything is parented to the skateboard. Choose the board root bone and let's move it around. Okay, that works. When we move the board bone, Eric moves around. Let's just test this a bit more. Now he's riding on an invisible skateboard because we haven't completed our custom controls yet. Just gonna test this back and forth. Perfect. So we're halfway done. But wait, remember the spare bone that we created? Well, we can manipulate that as well because Eric's head, pelvis, hips are all connected, are all parented to the spare bone. The spare bone is used to as a way to tweak Eric a little bit further to give him that look. So let's just choose that spare bone and let's see what it does. Perfect. Okay, this looks good. Let's complete this setup. Connect the custom controls back to the skateboard rig because we have to send the custom control data back to the skateboard to complete the whole thing. Otherwise, the skateboard won't move. Oh, we can actually template the rest of it. You can see that Eric is very far off from the skateboard. Once this is complete, the skateboard should snap to Eric's feet. So what do we do with this custom control? Well, we need to send it back to the skateboard rig. Where do we connect it? Well, how do we make the skateboard move? This line here is making the skateboard move. Well, we're making the skateboard move in this rig pose node over here. So why don't we connect it over there? Why don't we connect this rig pose in replacement of this one? For this one, you don't really need to blast it because I know that this contains all these other bones, all these other miscellaneous bones here. Because the skateboard is a very simple rig setup, it only has a single bone driving the whole skateboard rig. We can actually just connect it in. But for good practice, we should blast it and isolate it just to be clean, to have a clean setup. But it's not really necessary for this particular example just because it's so simple. Points. Delete not selected. Now I'm going to choose this and I'm going to choose all the skateboard bones. Root. We don't need the spare bone. We need the board bone here. Enter. There's only 2. Okay, we're done. Let's test this out. You know what? Let's just merge it together. Because we need to see them both together. Merge this together. We can see it. Okay, how do we test this? The same way we tested it before. We go back to our custom controls. Our custom controls here, where we have the rig pose node. Well, that's where the magic happens. Okay, let's take this rig pose node, come over here, and let's choose the board root. Okay, so now it's working. We have the board connected to Eric and it's feeding back to the board, so it's animating the skateboard and Eric at the same time, so his feet are locked on. And we have the spare bone, where are you? This is their spare bone. And that's further tweaking the position or the pose, Eric's pose a little further. So to give us a little bit more attitude. This is incredibly fun to play around with. Here's a sneak peek for the next video. We haven't learned how to move the entire rig around the scene. When we move the board root and board controls, Eric goes into posing mode. How do we actually move Eric and the skateboard around the scene? What if we wanted to animate Eric rolling around a terrain? In the next video, I'll show you how to translate both controls at the same time to maintain Eric's offset positions. If we have time in the next video, we'll also go over some simple sine waves to create easy animations with the skateboard. Thanks for watching and sticking to the end.